Hello and welcome to the lecture titled Positive Effects of Eudaimonic Well-Being on Health, Implications for Aging and Inequality. Well, in the earlier 3 to 4 lectures, we engaged with subjective well-being or the hedonic well-being and how different kinds of interventions could be useful in enhancing the experience of subjective well-being with the help of a variety of research, particularly conducted with the help of experimental research. Particularly, we went into understanding the interventions on the basis of enhancing positive experiences such as gratitude, empathy, etc., as well as the interventions that focused on managing stress to enhance subjective well being. Here in this lecture, we are going to understand eudaimonic well being that focuses on the human potential and how the pursuit of that can add to the feeling of growth as well as well being amongst the people. Particularly, we are going to take up the issues of aging and inequality, that how the positive effects of eudaimonic well being have been noted amongst these vulnerable populations. So, let's take a look at these important elements of human life with the help of the theoretical framework of eudaimonic well-being, which has been initiated and popularized by Carol Riff. And today we are going to use the work primarily done by Carol Riff and her colleagues. And in a recent article, journal articles in 2017, she has done this particular review that we are going to present in this particular lecture. So that's really going to be interesting because the scientist, psychologist, who has been interested in eudaimonic well-being, who has done decades of research on that, and also has done a review of relevant studies that have shown the positive effects of eudaimonic well-being on health of elderly people as well as people facing inequality in the society on the basis of economic and other important social criteria. So, what is the outline of the presentation? What are the things that we are going to learn here? Well, we are going to recapitulate the concept of eudaimonic well being, and the key question that we are going to ask in this lecture is: does the presence of eudaimonic well being improves physical health? So, that's the soul of this particular lecture. We'll be taking evidence from studies on aging, as I told earlier, that Carol Riff's article 2017 that has done a meaningful, comprehensive review of eudaimonic well-being and its impact on health among elderly population as well as people facing inequality. So we'll be focusing on evidences from studies on aging first that will take care of existential and health issues amongst the elderly. What are the kind of problems that they happen to face, the older adults, and buffering or protecting effects of eudaimonic well-being on elderly populations' health. We are also going to take up the evidence from studies on inequality. We are particularly going to focus on not just income level, but also employment status as well as education level of people that mark lower socioeconomic status of the person. Furthermore, we are also going to take up the population, such as African American population in the United States, and how they have been facing um, or how they have been having the status of minority, and historically they have been facing uh, racial prejudice, and what is the impact that the eudaimonic well-being has in their life, or what are the ways in which eudaimonic well-being has been associated with the experience of prejudice, and also the way they have been trying to address that prejudice. So that is going to be the overall structure of this particular lecture. All right, so let's move on and try to take a look at eudaimonic well-being. Well, eudaimonia or eudaimonic well-being as a term has been used, first of all, in modern psychology by Carol Riff in a manner that she conducted um, a series of systematic studies to establish eudaimonia or eudaimonic well-being, or rather psychological well-being as an important concept under eudaimonic well-being, to try and study its association or its impact on um, various experiences of human beings. So that was 1989, and this article that we are using in this lecture is 2017 article, which is almost like 3 decades of serious systematic research that has been done. So let's take a look at various aspects of eudaimonic well-being. Well, it has its parallels with the concept of psychological well-being. We are going to see that, but overall, when we talk about eudaimonic well-being, there will be some other elements also that have been added to um, the concept of eudaimonic well-being besides the psychological well-being. So we are going to see very soon such conceptual framework of eudaimonic well-being. So psychological well-being, as we have already noticed, it is based on eudaimonic view of well-being. What does that mean? So that goes back to Aristotle's contribution, who talked about to be true to one's inner self, and that inner self is nothing but daemon, in order to live a meaningful life. So it's important that we remain in touch with our potential, our inner self or demon, in order to live a life with a sense of personal growth. What are the elements of psychological well being as noticed or as researched upon by Carol Riff? Well, the first one is sense of meaning in life, concerns about the question of who I am. The second one is pursuit of one's ethical values in life. That's the second one. And third one, environmental mastery, making suitable changes in the environment to suit one's self growth. So that these are the three important elements that we have observed in the concept of psychological well-being. But eudaimonia or eudaimonic well-being also um, incorporates other important elements, as Carol Riff 2017 has talked about. And these added dimensions can be autonomy, which is judging oneself by personal standards rather than other standards. So, autonomy in terms of not just freedom or seeking freedom in all one's creative endeavors, but also in terms of judging oneself with the help of one's own standards rather than other standards. The second one is positive relationships, that also has been pointed out in other concepts of well being, and self acceptance, accepting personal strengths as well as weaknesses. So, these have been important markers of eudaimonic well being, as the study of eudaimonic well being very systematically has been taken up since 1989 by Carol Riff and her colleagues or associates. We also saw the limitations of psychological well-being or eudaimonic well-being, that it puts too much of onus on the person to change the environment, and particularly in adverse circumstances, it might be difficult for people to change their own circumstances. So, with that limitation, let us also look at the strengths of this particular concept of eudaimonic well being in terms of its impact on the health outcomes of sections of the society that can be taken to be living vulnerable lives, particularly the elderly population, as well as people living with lower socioeconomic status, also marked by unequal status in the society in terms of access to the resources. Okay, so the key question, as I mentioned earlier also, is going to be, does the presence of eudaimonic well being improves physical health? And on this particular question, there are plenty of important and meaningful answers that have been provided by a series of studies that incorporates various elements of eudaimonic well being. And we are going to see that how health improves as um, influenced by or as shaped by eudaimonic well-being or as associated with eudaimonic well-being amongst the different sections of the society. And we are going to deal with aging population or elderly population and people with lower socioeconomic status. Let's begin with the kind of situation or existential issues that are faced by the elderly population and the potential impact that such existential condition may have on the health status of elderly people. So let's begin with looking at the existential conditions or the situations, the life stage that they are in, and how that creates different kinds of challenges for them, which are related to the question of meaning in life or who really I am, when the various kinds of roles that they were in terms of work life, family life, that has changed because of their um, later adulthood when they retire or when they do not remain strong enough, capable enough, or rather, I should say, perceived to be not being able to contribute in a manner that could have been expected with younger adults. So, there is a general decline in the experience of purpose and personal growth among the elderly. So, there have been some evidence suggesting that there is a general decline in the experience of purpose and personal growth among the elderly. That indicates lower eudaimonic well being because when you talk about purpose and personal growth, these are important elements of the eudaimonic well being that we observed earlier. Some of the major reasons for this has been pointed out to be decline in meaningful engagement in work, family, or community context over time for the elderly people. So, again, being perceived as, or the self perception of, not having a major role as far as work life, as far as work, family, or community life is concerned. So that creates that um, uh, paucity of role, any major or meaningful role that they are either perceived to be or they themselves perceive to be having in the work, family, or community life, that lack of meaningful engagement could be one of the major reasons for a decline in the experience of purpose and personal growth. However, elderly also vary in their experiences of eudaimonic well-being. It doesn't mean that for all the elderly people, there is a general decline in the experience of purpose and self-growth. There are some elderly people who have more experience of eudaimonic well-being and they have better health as well as longevity. So this is one of the important things that we have taken up in this lecture to point out that despite this general decline that may be observed amongst the elderly people, are there some evidences of number one, a better eudaimonic well-being also? So, are there some elderly people who are able to experience eudaimonic well-being? And if yes, then does that eudaimonic well-being or higher levels of eudaimonic well-being also improves their health and longevity? So, we are going to take this particular theme up in the next couple of slides. So, the protecting effects of eudaimonic well-being on elderly person's health. So, that's also known as buffering effect or the protecting effects of eudaimonic well-being on elderly populations' health. Well, it's important to understand that elderly people who are high on purpose in life have a reduced risk of death. So, this is an important set of findings with the help of studies involving eudaimonic well being, and it has been observed that elderly people who are high on purpose in life, or an important dimension of eudaimonic well being, have a reduced risk of death in near future, which is 6 months, 6 years, I beg your pardon, from the time of study. Such elderly people also reported lower risk of Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment. So that's important to understand that those elderly people who had higher purpose in life had a reduced risk of death. And not only that, but also reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment. So that is something which is important to be looked at. Again, these are correlational studies, and we have already seen in our lecture 7 in this lecture series that how correlational studies help us understand the association between different kind of variables and how predictions regarding those associations can actually be made. So, on the basis of such kind of correlational studies, um, and at times, so these kinds of studies have also utilized the experimental studies where control group and the experimental groups have been compared, and it has been seen that whether or not there is a greater impact of eudaimonic well-being on the health outcomes of people. Although the random assignment in the experimental studies that we had learned in the ideal experimental design might not have been met in this particular condition, because again it's difficult to induce eudaimonic well-being amongst people. So still, such correlational and experimental studies that have been utilized partly or fully have brought us to such kind of results that purpose in life, higher purpose in life, or higher eudaimonic well-being can be associated with lower risk of death, lower risk of Alzheimer's disease, and lower risk of mild cognitive impairment. Similarly, we have studies using post mortem analysis of brain pathology, and that have also revealed a positive impact of eudaimonic well being. For example, elderly people with similar or comparable brain pathology but higher levels of purpose in life or eudaimonic well being than other participants, other matched group, in terms of brain pathology, reported better cognitive functioning. So, this is again an important element of comparative studies that are pointing out the positive health impact of eudaimonic well being amongst the elderly population. Similarly, elderly people with higher comorbidity would mean that there are multiple set of diseases that are related to each other or may be found to be coexisting with another disease. So hypertension, arthritis, these are comorbid, I mean, diseases as far as elderly population goes because of the changes in the physiological functioning in terms of um, uh, later adulthood that is encountered by people. So, elderly people with higher comorbidity of hypertension and arthritis, but being higher on eudaimonic well being, they reported to be having lower levels of inflammatory marker of comorbidity, which basically means that higher the eudaimonic well-being among the elderly people, lower the inflammatory markers of such comorbidity of diseases such as hypertension and arthritis. And these lower levels of inflammatory markers, these inflammatory markers are the interleukin 6 and C receptive protein, which actually indicate um, deteriorations in terms of physical health problems like hypertension and arthritis. So, higher the eudaimonic well being, lower the inflammatory markers of comorbid conditions of hypertension and arthritis. And these inflammatory markers are nothing but interleukin 6 and C receptor protein that indicate the um, disease conditions in terms of hypertension and arthritis. So, eudaimonic well being lowers the levels of such kind of disease probabilities or disease conditions. Then another important problem amongst the elderly population, by virtue of their aging physical conditions, is the sleep disturbance. And we have seen here also that the presence of eudaimonic well-being helps reduce these sleep-related problems, being not able to complete the sleep cycle or having full sleep. So, better eudaimonic well being or purpose in life helps reduce the sleep related problems also. So, there are some empirical studies in terms of variable based studies that have indicated that among the elderly women with higher levels of eudaimonic well being in all the dimensions of eudaimonic well being except for autonomy, such elderly women experience lower levels of sleep problems. So, again, if we look at the evidence for the health related um, conditions or health problems, we find that eudaimonic well being actually reduces the problems, not only the physical health problems or diseases, but also the sleep related problems or sleep disturbance. For example, not being able to complete the sleep cycle or having full sleep. So, again, there are plenty of examples that we have seen, or plenty of evidence that we have seen that how your demonic well being can have a positive association with better physical health, particularly when we talk about the problem of or the population that is elderly population or aging population. So, we now move on to the protective effect of eudaimonic well-being on inequality. So people who are um, lower on their access to the resources or access to the important aspects of people's life in terms of what they can utilize to uh, make a better life or have a better life. For example, income, then employment status, as well as education. So, if people are lower on the socioeconomic criteria, so how does, in those conditions also, eudaimonic well-being may have its protective effect as far as physical health of such people are concerned? So, education, employment, and income are the the major criteria for defining socioeconomic status in such kind of studies, which also makes sense because education, employment, and income are important features as far as gaining important or availing important resources for one's survival or thriving is concerned. So, generally, lower socioeconomic status is associated with health problems. That is something which we had seen earlier also in this lecture. However, we also see that higher educational status is generally associated with higher eudaimonic well-being. So this is one example of not only that lower socioeconomic is associated with health problems, but also we find that higher education status, I mean, could be one condition that is associated with higher eudaimonic well-being, although the cause and effect relationship and its directionality between the two is not established. There is one typo there. I beg your pardon. It should be that the directionality between the two is not established rather than established. So it's important to notice that although there is an association between higher eudaimonic well-being and higher education status, yet we find that what leads to what. For example, eudaimonic well-being leading to higher education status, or higher education status leading to the knowledge or the resources to have a better eudaimonic well-being. So that has not been established. So again, I would indicate that there is one typographical error here. So it should read that the directionality between the two is not established. Anyway, so we got to move ahead and see that what other important lessons we can learn from such studies. So for we see that people with lower socioeconomic, I beg your pardon, lower educational status are also found to be high on eudaimonic well-being, thereby having less health problems. So again, we are seeing a similar kind of pattern that we saw among the elderly population, that for also for elderly population, um, being on the higher side of age um, had a general association with lower um, physical health condition, or um, uh, having more proneness to disease and less longevity. However, even there we found that there could be elderly people with better eudaimonic well-being experience. Here also we find that even people with lower education status could be having higher eudaimonic well-being and thereby lesser health problems. Let's take some examples. So lower educational status is generally found to be associated with higher inflammatory marker. Again, there is one typographical error. I beg your pardon for that. So lower educational status is generally found to be associated with higher inflammatory marker, that is interleukin 6. So it's important that such kind of inflammatory markers are taken care of or reduced. And how is it done? Or how is the eudaimonic well-being plays its own role there? We have seen that less educated people who had higher eudaimonic well-being reported lower levels of interleukin 6 that is associated with various health problems such as cardiovascular disease, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, osteoporosis. So it's important to understand this association between eudaimonic well-being and its inverse or negative association with interleukin 6 as the inflammatory marker associated with cardiovascular diseases, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and osteoporosis. Again, here is an evidence of the protecting effect of eudaimonic well-being on the health of people with lower access to the resources, or the lower um, or worse conditions as far as the access to the resources are concerned. And one example we have seen is that of being less educated for whatever reasons. So we also move on then to another set of studies which have indicated that glycosylated hemoglobin, that is a marker of glycemic control connected to type 2 diabetes, has been found to be higher among the lower income groups. So, lower income groups, people being more prone to type 2 diabetes, and the indicator is HbA1c, which is glycosylated hemoglobin, which in fact tends to be associated with type 2 diabetes. So that is being higher amongst the people with lower income. However, again, the protecting effect of eudaimonic well being, we can see here the presence of eudaimonic well being among this section of people was associated with lower levels of glycosylated hemoglobin or HbA1c. So that's another evidence for how eudaimonic well-being can have protecting effect on the uh, physical health problems of people. Furthermore, there are some very interesting yet surprising set of findings that have been observed among the African American communities in the United States. Why is this community important? Because people talk about different kind of changes that have occurred in this African American population in the United States. However, we find that until 1960s, it was I mean, there are evidences that how racism or racial prejudice was highly prevalent, and 1960s created not only the awareness amongst the African Americans, but also amongst the other parts of the world that how this prejudice needs to be acknowledged and also reduced or addressed. So Martin Luther King Jr.'s revolution or movement to acknowledge and address this racial prejudice has been known in general to the entire world. And that's the historical background of African American population in terms of the minority status as well as the racial prejudice that they have been subjected to, thereby a case that can be made regarding inequality that they have faced in the United States, historically speaking. So they have been at the receiving end of prejudice and racism, but they are higher on eudaimonic well-being than the white majority population. So that's another interesting yet surprising set of findings, which tells us that surprisingly, racial prejudice has not lowered their eudaimonic well-being, thereby physical health problems. Thereby, it has also reduced the physical health problems. So they are higher on eudaimonic well-being, which has stronger probability of reducing their physical health problems than the white majority population. So one can also try and understand it in a manner that countering prejudice in everyday life through community solidarity could be one way to understand the reason behind um, their higher eudaimonic well-being in the post 1960s USA, where there has been an acknowledgement of racial prejudice as well as ways to address that. And that might have its own relationship with countering prejudice in everyday life through community solidarity in the post 1960s United States. So that could be one probable reason. Perhaps more qualitative studies would be needed to try and understand, and not just correlational studies, that how we can explain these kinds of surprising findings amongst the people. So allow the people to speak regarding their own experiences of well-being as well as the probable reasons regarding how they handle their personal, relational, as well as community life. So that could be a question for important research projects based on ethnographic or the qualitative studies to try and understand as well as explain that the nature or the level of eudaimonic well-being, if that is higher, what could be the probable reasons behind that. With that, we have come to an end to this lecture. Um, in the next lecture, we are also going to see that how we can, um, if or rather assuming that eudaimonic well-being has its protecting effect as far as physical health of people is concerned, then what are the ways in which we can try and create certain conditions or have certain kinds of interventions to foster or enhance eudaimonic well-being for people. So we'll take that question up in the next lecture in this lecture series. Thank you very much.